National Union of Nurses, that we might add is yet to be registered, which is what you are pushing for. Give us the timeline of the events that took place from last year, your attempts to speak to the government, which led to the strike that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah, actually the strike that we have today ideally was given on September 17th, that is last year. And when we gave that strike notice, the government moved with very speed, and we were actually humbled at the manner that the government handled our strike notice. It very fast constituted an arbitrator, and we went into negotiations, and the Public Service Commission wrote to the two ministries telling them to engage us. We continued the negotiation. We had actually raised about 18 issues that we wanted the government to address. And we went on with the negotiation for about 1.5 months. But the conciliator had given, the Minister of Labour had given 30 days. But we went overboard above 30 days because we wanted to have these things ironed out. We did what we call a recognition agreement, and that recognition agreement was actually approved by the Attorney General to be adopted by the two ministries and the Public Service Commission. It was to be signed so that we can now have the opportunity to delve into the main issues that are facing nurses in this country. But when we were just about to sign that recognition agreement, the two ministries say, no, we can't sign the recognition agreement until the moment you have the final certificate of registration. So when they said like that, we were to sign it on a Tuesday, which I think was the 20th of November. And they said, we wait for the registration. Later on, we realized that on that day they were telling us to wait for the registration. They had moved behind the bus, behind our backs, and they had gone to the Ministry of Labour, and they had spoken to the National Labour Board of Kenya, and they had instructed the National Labour Board of Kenya not to register our union. So that way, the recognition agreement still lies in the two ministries, waiting to be signed. When we called the strike for September 17th, which was to begin on 3rd October, we had a preliminary agreement with the Ministry of Labour, which was saying that within 3 weeks, from 28th of September, which was to enter around 18th of October, the National Labour Board of Kenya was going to meet and make a decision on our application for registration, which was not forthcoming. September ended, October ended. Now we are now in November. Now November 25th, we have not received a communication which was supposed to have been communicated to us within 3 weeks, in between September 28th and around 18th or 20th of October. So we said, we can't wait forever. We gave another strike notice because the government here has bolted out of negotiation. It's saying we can't continue unless you produce the final certificate of registration. That is now how we came up with the second strike notice that eventually led to this strike that we have today. On 25th, we gave another strike notice. Then immediately we gave the strike notice. The Registrar of Trade Unions on 27th wrote us saying that your application for registration was denied. Honestly, when you look at that event, you realize that the rejection, the informing us of rejection of our certificate for registration was only meant to twist us so that we don't go on strike. But since the communication had not come within the time that we had agreed with the Ministry of Labour, we proceeded. And from there, we have been told that we cannot continue negotiating when you are not registered. Then we went and told our people, the government has said, there's nothing we can do. We have to proceed ahead and do what the government in this country really understand. And that is how that strike started on 3rd of December. Okay,
let's fast forward now to the High Court now requesting you to go back to work. Why haven't we seen you return to work since this High Court order?
First of all, I want to indicate that from the word go, we have to respect all court orders. Because if we don't respect the judiciary, we are going to run down our own country and our own systems. But we must be also in an airport to criticize decisions that are being made by the judiciary. Criticizing decisions of the judiciary does not mean we do not respect those decisions. I want to say that from the onset, I have said that I'll continue saying that the order that was given by Justice Maureen Onyango was unlawful, was unconstitutional, was unprocedural, and was driven by corrupt intentions. And that is something I cannot withdraw until I do die. We are saying we actually obeyed that order that was given by Justice Maureen. We went back to places of work, and when we went to places of work, what we found there, the environment was too hostile. It was not conducive for us to discharge our mandate. First we went, we found we did not have salaries. When you don't have a salary, then you have been dismissed. We found our leaders have been transferred to same arid areas, Wajir, Wajir, Mandera, Marsabit, those areas. We found that those nurses who are in managerial position, even doctors, who happen to have asked the government to resolve the issue of the nurses and probably register the nurses union, like Dr. Simiyu Senrego, the Provincial Director of Medical Services of Coast Province, was asking why the registration of the nurses union is not something big. Why can't the government do it? You know what they did to him? They demoted him from a Provincial Director of Medical Services to just a surgeon and sent it to Muranga. I understand he resigned last week from the government. So when you look at these kind of things, the nurses who are in charge, for example, Matron Mburuku of Coast General Provincial Hospital had been demoted now to be a teacher at MTC Mombasa. The Provincial Nursing Officer of Kakamega, Western Province, has also been demoted to go to MTC. Somebody who's almost retiring, you want him to go to the books, read what? Let him do what he has been doing management and he goes home. He's almost retiring. So these kind of frustrations, intimidation and victimizations, no salary transfer, the reduction in rank, so on and so forth, were issues that had now to be handled. And when we went back to court on 8th of January, our intention was to challenge the orders that were unprocedurally, illegally, unconstitutionally, and unlawfully given by Justice Maureen. But the judge asked us, what do you want to achieve at the end of the day? We told the judge, we want the nurses to go back to work, but we want them to go back with respect. We want them to go back with an environment that is conducive. So the judge ordered, go back to work. Since you have undertaken to go back to work, go back to work. If you find any difficulties, come back on Friday that week, which was on 11th, for further directions. We went and we found what I've just explained. We went back to court on Friday and we had evidence. We produced to court letters of transfer, show cause letters, salaries has been stopped. And the judge and the court agreed with us that indeed there is victimization.
Okay.
Then the court ordered that go now and sit down the employer and the agents under the chairmanship of the Ministry of Labour, work a return to work formula to address this embedment that nurses have faced.
Okay. All right. And indeed, a sad state of affairs because there's a lot of Kenyans that have been suffering since last year. You've talked about the need for nurses to have a union. Why is that? What are the issues that nurses face in this country? And I'll read you one SMS and you can tell me if this is something you agree with. SMSs that you are sending us in on 8040. We have Mato who's sent in a text from Mwingi. You say, morning, I am a nurse and I support the union. For the last 3 years, I've been manning a facility alone. Given the workload, I have never had leave. I work in the hardest region in Kenya, yet my earnings are just 20,000 shillings. We are suffering and we need help. Do these issues ring true? Tell us some of the issues that you addressed when you were saying last year you met and you had a raft of sort of 18 demands. What is the working situation for nurses in this country?
As you have seen, that nurse from Mwingi has spoken, and he speaks not for himself alone, but he speaks for many nurses who are going through this kind of modern day slavery and servitude. He's earning 20,000 shillings. The work he's doing right now, he's working as a medical consultant. There's no doctor there. He is working as a nurse, he's the nurse. He's the medical lab, there's no lab there. In fact, the people he works with from that explanation is the watchman himself. There are almost 2 people and maybe someone who collects money. So this is the kind of things that nurses go through that make our nursing service delivery quite difficult in this country. We have problems like, for example, we earn very little salary. That particular nurse who has spoken is probably on contract. When you are on contract, the law of the land is very clear that work of equal value should attract equal payment. So when a nurse, for example, maybe she's having a diploma, she's earning 20,000, and her colleague with a diploma is maybe earning 68,000. Is that unlawful? Probably is unlawful, because even what will you do with 20,000? Will you buy school fees? Will you pay school fees for your child? Will you buy food? Will you buy clothing? What will you do with that 20,000? Those are the kind of environment we work in. We work in situations where the international standard by the World Health Organization and the International Council of Nurses has standards that it has put in place. For example, how many nurses do you need for this population? In Kenya today, we need 80,000 nurses in the public service. That's according to International Council of Nurses and the World Health Organization standards. This will translate down to mean that for critical care patients, we need a ratio of 1:1. Labor ward, we need a ratio of 1:1. High dependent unit, we need a ratio of 2 nurses for 3 patients. When you look at that, you go to a hospital like Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, which is a referral facility. My father was admitted there. He died. You find 3 patients on a bed. So when you look at that, what ratios are those? Even those beds, some of them don't even have blankets, they don't have mattresses. Patients are sleeping on the ground. It's even in Kenyatta National Hospital. You go to 6th floor, you go to 6A, 6B up to D. You will see the kind of scenarios. Patients don't have drugs. There are no supplies. So we are saying we want a comprehensive overhaul of healthcare system in Kenya. When we come to decision making and policy making, for example, why was the Health Service Commission removed from the Constitution? Because this is the only body which will have been mandated to handle specific issues within healthcare system. So nurses, we are saying we do not want to have nurses who are employed on contract. We want all on contracts to be employed on permanent and pensionable terms. There is serious and acute shortage of nurses in Kenya. We have 15,000 nurses. Actually, the report that has been given by the ministry shows 13,200 are in permanent and pensionable terms and conditions of service. That will give you a ratio of about 1 to 60 nurses. One nurse is supposed to manage 60 patients, which is not possible. So we are saying this shortage has to be addressed by employing more nurses. We have a group of nurses that has not been employed for the last 10 years. Nurses would have degrees, they're not employed. So apart from that, nurses want to be involved in decision making, in policy making. The highest ranking nurses in Kenya is a chief nurse. A chief nurse is a very small person. It doesn't influence even the policy. When you come from the Director of Medical Services, you'll come around 6 steps. So if I have to see the Director of Medical Services as a nurse, I'll have to see the chief nurse, I'll have to see another one, until I go to Senior Deputy Director of Medical Services. So you realize that we are nowhere close to decision-making organs or the policy influence. We cannot influence policy. And these are the things that have demoralized nurses. When you go to a place of work, you finish school with somebody, and maybe it's a lawyer, whoever it is, in 2 or 3 years' time, somebody is living a different life and went to school together. If it's a degree, we have degrees. Personally, I'm a graduate. You find out that the kind of life we are leading as nurses is not an equivalent of what we are supposed to be living. Today, that nurse earning 20,000 shillings, for example, has a child in Starehe Boys. Starehe Boys school fees about 6, maybe Alliance or Mangu. Mangu is about almost 80,000 per year. Can this parent really afford that? So what we are saying, we do not want things which are out of the norm. We just want to be given a normal working environment where NEPOLAs do our work. The union is the only avenue that is constitutionally and legally has the mandate to engage the employer in employment and labor relation matters. So without a union, we cannot have an organ that defends us.
Seth, why do you think the government is reluctant to register the Kenya National Union of Nurses?
You realize that the Prime Minister gave a directive that our union should be registered. But today, as we are talking, he has gone underground. One will want to know why a Prime Minister is an equivalent of the President, because we have two centers of powers in Kenya. There are 2 centers of power, whether someone likes it or not. We have the Prime Minister on the other side and have the President on the other side. They are equal, according to the agreement that was signed that ended the stalemate that was there in 2007. So the Prime Minister is like the President. And he says the nurses have a constitutional right to form, join and participate in activities and programs of a trade union. What happens? A small man like Tom Ondeke moves on tomorrow, and because the Prime Minister asks, hey, you know ODM is being funded by this money from the nurses. You cannot say this, you're going to kill the Union of Civil Servants, which is giving you money to fund your programs. And the Prime Minister goes underground.
Would you prefer to be under the Union of Civil Servants? Why do you want to have a union that's separate from that? Because you are civil servants.
First of all, you need to understand that nursing is a unique profession. It is a profession. Nursing is not an amorphous organization. It's not an amorphous thing. It's a specific profession that has got specific interests and specific needs that must be addressed within that confine of the profession themselves. In Kenya, people don't even understand what a trade union is. You realize that someone comes and says, Union of Kenya Civil Servants, and they're calling it a trade union. It isn't a trade union. What's a trade? A trade is a craft. It's a profession. It is something that you have done over years, that you have acquired some knowledge, skills, and attitude through experience and continuous education, and you own it and you say, this is our trade. This is our craft. This is our profession. So you cannot have a union in Kenya called Union of Kenya Civil Servants. You cannot have a union in Kenya called Kenya Domestic education allied, and what union. A union is a trade. It's specific to address specific issues within that profession.
So Seth, you don't feel like you would be well represented within the Union of Kenya Civil Servants?
Union of Kenya Civil Servants has never represented nurses in anything. Look at the things we are looking at. We are saying nurses ought to be paid non-practice allowance. The doctors get it. Nurses don't practice. Once you are working in the public sector, it's required that you don't practice. So we are supposed to be given that. Nurses want call allowance. Doctors are given that. Nurses aren't given. Nurses want to have their staffing levels filled. The Union of Kenya Civil Servants has been in this country for more than 40 years.
Did you try to engage with them and let them know these are your grievances that you need addressed? The question is, did you try with them and then not feel like your issues were being addressed and then made the decision to try and form your own union?
The issue is that the Labor Relations Act, I like talking about the law. The Labor Relations Act, section 14, is very clear. It says that the registrar of trade union may register a trade union if it represents more sectors, more than one sector, if that trade union has provision in its constitution to take care of those other sectors it intends to represent. Now, the Union of Kenya Civil Servants is on constitution. We have never seen it. It does not have any provision to represent nurses. It does not have the ability. It does not have the capacity. Because what nurses go through, for example, we work at night. We work 24/7 shifts. We are the people with the patients. And we are the people, a research was done somewhere in 2005, and it found out that for what we call nosocomial infections, those diseases that people get at the hospital, yes, nurses were prone to those infections 3 times more than any other profession. And that is why we came up with something called high-risk allowance, which has never been implemented, though it was approved in 2008. From decades, Kenyan nurses have been represented in employment and labor relation matters by their professional societies. In 1997, National Nursing Association of Kenya, together with Kenya Nursing Association, called a national strike that paralyzed healthcare system in Kenya. They came out with the risk allowance, which was actually 3,800. Again in 2003, Kenya nurses went on strike through their National Nursing Association and the Kenya Progressive Nursing Association. They came out with the uniform allowance, which was 3,000. In 2008, our professional societies again threatened to go on strike. When they threatened to go on strike, they came up with various issues that the government pledged to implement. One of the issues was to employ 23,000 nurses. They have never employed. One of them was to pay non-practice allowance of 30,000. They have never paid. High-risk allowance of 20,000. They have never paid. There were several things that was agreed in 2008. I'm telling you this because you realize that from 1997 up to now, it is our professional societies that have been championing the interest of the nurses. Where is the Union of Kenya Civil Servants? Today, as we are talking, nurses are on strike. What is the Union of Kenya Civil Servants saying? Sack all of them. Sack them. You know, we have a good relationship with the government. Sack them. These people should not be on strike. This is a union you are saying should represent nurses. Honestly, you cannot expect Al-Shabaab to come and speak on behalf of the Kenyan government.
Okay, we understand just where you're coming from with that one. The question then a lot of people would be asking is, at any point during this impasse, do you at all feel for the patients that are suffering in hospital? That is the rallying question that a lot of people would ask. Well, what about the patients? Even while you're on strike and you're talking about conditions in hospital, that's fine, we understand, that are not up to par. But is there any feeling of compunction, of guilt, of what's happening with the patients now that you are not at work?
You have just heard from Mombasa that when we had that accident, nurses were called and they went back to work. When they stabilized the patient, they left. We have a feeling for the patients. If we don't have, then we are in the wrong profession. As a profession, we have always wanted to work within the international acceptable standards of industrial actions. For example, the International Council of Nurses has a charter on industrial action, but that charter cannot be implemented in Kenya because we don't have a union. When you look at the constitution of the Kenya National Union of Nurses, it proposes that it will work within the International Council of Nurses charter when it comes to the strike. What does it say? It says when nurses go on strike, they must put the health of the nation first. We must take care of the health of the nation. What does that one mean? It means that when nurses want to go on strike, we have some structures put in place. so that when we are going strike, we don't leave our mothers to die in labor. We don't switch off the machines in critical care units. We do not leave the babies to die in newborn units. We take care of them. In accident and emergency department, we leave a skeleton of nurses to take care of accident and emergency. But without a trade union, then we do not have these structures in place. We cannot do it.
Okay, all right. Keep your comments coming in. We are speaking with Seth Panyako, who is the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Nurses that is seeking registration. We will remind you the nurses have been on strike since last year. And we're asking you now what your thoughts are on this. Do you support the nurses' strike? And I will be honest with you, throughout the morning, from 6 a.m. right up till now, that's about 2.5 hours, I am hard-pressed to find any SMS, and we have hundreds of them coming in for anybody who says they do not support the nurses union, from those who are nurses to those who aren't. So this is obviously something that is, you know, finding a lot of support amongst the Kenyans. Literally all of them saying, yes, I support them. Jeff from Migori County, thank you. We get your SMS. You say, I fully support the strike. There's an interesting one here and I'd like to share with Seth. It's from Kamadi. He says, I support the views of Seth. I am the Executive Secretary of KUPPET in Mombasa County. The nurses need a union like yesterday. Every profession is unique and has needs that are specific. Let those concerned do the sensible thing, register the union. He's talking from KUPPET. I wonder if you've had the opportunity to speak with persons from other labor groups and to see if you can perhaps rally their support towards your demands.
I can assure you, I'm a man of the people. I speak with people. I have so many friends in trade unions. In fact, I keep telling nurses that I don't have to lead nurses, but I have to deliver the union to the nurses, because even as we are talking today, I have workers who are not nurses, who are not in health sector, who are saying, come, help us to get a union. They are telling us, you don't have to lead the nurses. You don't have to lead the health workers. Come, help us. But I'm a friend of the Secretary General of KUPPET. We talk with the officials of NAT. Even I was talking to the Allied, what is it called, Wafula, for Aviation and Allied Workers Union. And he was asking what they can be able to do. We told them there's a lot you can do for us, but we cannot tell you because you are trade unions, the trade union movement. I am assuring you that the trade union movement in Kenya is supporting this cause. But the problem we have, and I will tell you without fear, like we have the new center that has been created in Kenya to represent public servants, unions within public servants. It's like KOTU. You know it, yes. The one that's being led by Akino Okuta and the rest. Right. And I think Odeke is one of the top officials there. Ondeke is the one opposing this union. Do you expect that center to come out and say, we are supporting the nurses?
Let's talk about the ministers involved. We have the Ministry of Labor. We also have the Minister for Medical Services. We had the Minister for Medical Services at some point last year when your strike had began. He said it was not his responsibility and the fault and blame did not lie with his ministry because it should ideally fall under the Ministry of Labor that should assist you with getting the union registered. Where do you think the holdup is between these two ministries?
I think as by today, other than victimization and those things that the two ministries are doing, basically I don't have a quarrel with them. I'll have a quarrel with the Ministry of Medical Services and the Ministry of Public Health and Sanitation. One, that our union is registered. They have told us they cannot engage us because we are not registered, and that's true. That's the law. What they are saying is simply the law. We cannot engage you because you're not registered. And I say, yes, we must respect the rule of law. So the problem is within the Ministry of Labor. And that is where the country ought to know who is running the Ministry of Labor.
Have you made attempts to speak with the minister?
We met the minister with all his team, with everybody in the ministry, and he came and he said, we have come to discuss this issue. We made a decision not to register your union, period, court to court. And he walked out with his team. That's where the problem is. And somebody ought to go down deep and find out, why is the Minister of Labor behaving the way he's behaving?
Why do you think he's behaving?
It's corruption. The answer is very obvious. Corruption. The nurses' money is being used to pay the minister. And this is not something I'll speak with any fear. It's corruption because Francis Atwoli literally runs the Ministry of Labor. Francis Atwoli literally holds the National Labor Board in his hands. He goes there and he pays a few things, a few shillings. Kina Ikura Ukot cheating people on the international platform that they are accolade lawyers of human rights. What human rights does Dr. Ikura Ukot represent? He doesn't. He's corrupt. He is the chairman of the National Labor Board of Kenya. And you saw me act with him on the corridor. I asked him, what is the functions of the National Labour Board of Kenya. The strict function of the National Labour Board of Kenya is to advise the minister. But they are saying in our case, the National Labour Board of Kenya made a resolution that our union should not be registered. When I asked him that question on the corridor, he said to go to court. I wanted him to tell the country, does the National Labour Board of Kenya has legal or constitutional mandate to make decisions or resolutions? He evaded the question. So these are the kind of people that we are saying we want to put in our institutions and entrust the lives of Kenyans. Look today, all hospitals, 250 hospital plus are closed in the country. And here is Dr. Ekura Aukot, who is an accolade, an international lawyer of human rights. He's known for these things of human rights. And he's telling me, go to court, let the nurses continue to be on the streets. Why is it a matter of life and death to register nurses union when we have a doctors union? The Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union was registered. We have teachers, have more than 10 trade unions in that sector.
Let's talk about some personal things that came up. Obviously, when we were talking about this and when you came out and said you want the nurses union registered, we were informed of your own personal status, that you were relieved of your duties from the Kenyatta National Hospital rather, and that you're not working. Would you like to clarify that situation for our viewers this morning?
Exactly. My dismissal from Kenyatta National Hospital is something of international. It's on the website, and you captured it very well in the Standard when I was dismissed. And I've always kept thanking the Standard Media Group and the Radio Africa Group for covering my dismissal, as well as Capital FM. My dismissal was based on core issues. I was a chief shop steward at Kenyatta National Hospital, and my role was to speak on behalf of the workers who could not engage the management directly. And when I went there, I found out that for 100 years, Kenyatta National Hospital has never had schemes of service. Even as we're talking today, they don't have. I found out that corruption in Kenyatta National Hospital has reached levels which were unacceptable. A hospital where people can steal bodies from mortuaries. A hospital where people can keep patients in private wing, and they can leave private wing and they can go home without paying anything. So I talked about sexual harassment in Kenyatta National Hospital. I condemned, and I said this thing should not continue. I spoke about harassment of junior officers. I talked about corruption in employment. We wanted Kenyatta National Hospital as a pillar of healthcare system in Kenya to be a center of excellence. And I fought for it. And I will assure you that you remember when Professor Lekiapi came to Kenyatta. Some of the complaints I had raised is that patients come to Kenyatta in the morning from accidents, and they are seen by the medical office of health. These are doctors with 1 degree. Nurses do the work, labor people, lab people do it. All the other workers do the work. But now when we have this patient to be reviewed by the senior doctor, who is normally now the consultant, the patient will stay in that accident and emergency department from 8 a.m. or even 5 a.m. up to 5 p.m. And I could not allow this. This was unpalatable. We cannot allow our patients to continue suffering, and we are earning. What are we doing? I questioned the role that's being played by medical consultant in that hospital. And when Olekiape came, I don't want to say how he came and why he came. He came to prove those things. He came and he talked to the patients. He found patients lying there from morning. He talked to them. What time did you come here? One patient said 5:30 in the morning. What are you waiting for? Senior review. Nangoja daktari mkubwa. And that was about 5:30 in the evening. So he proved what I was saying, that patients are being mishandled. What is happening today in Kenyatta? When that happened, when Olekiapi came there, and one of the things I was asking was that the next CEO of Kenyatta National Hospital should not be a medical doctor, because we wanted a CEO who would look at the hospital holistically. And when Richard was appointed the CEO of Kenyatta, it was a sigh of relief. I felt the hospital is now going to grow. The hospital is now going to recognize even a cleaner. If the hospital is dirty, you cannot be happy to be there even as a patient. But what has happened? The same people that were now keeping patients in accident and emergency department have coerced Richard, because Richard is not a medic. Now they have said, now patients, you come there, you are a sinner and you are admitted.
So what you're saying is you were relieved of your duties from the Kenyatta National Hospital for speaking out on some of the things that you've seen happening at the hospital?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We have an interesting question here from our viewer. Didn't leave your name, but you say, in case we don't get a return to work formula and a union, what will be the way forward? Will the strike continue?
First, I want to say there's no strike going on in Kenya by nurses. That has to be very clear. The strike ended when that illegal and unconstitutional order was issued by Lady Justice Maureen. What we have today is a standoff between the nurses and the people in government. Nurses want to go back to work, and they have not been given an opportunity to go back to work. Justice in Delhi gave a very good directive. He said that nurses have undertaken to go back to work, and our issue of the union has already been heard. We are waiting determination. We are saying when you are in struggle, when you are in a war, you win some battles, you lose some. But what I'm saying is that for surely nurses are going to have their own union.
Okay. What is the way forward now? You are talking about a return to work formula, saying how you've been victimized as you attempt to go back to work. How will you attempt to make sure that you get that return to work formula if indeed nurses are being victimized as they try to go back to work?
We are going back to court today, and I do not want to speak very much about things that are before the court because that's prejudicial. But what I'm saying, the impeachment that the nurses have, why their return to work formula is not coming out, is actually the chief nursing officer, Mr. Chris Rakwong. He is the main obstacle to have the healthcare system run the way it's supposed to run. Nurses, the court made a ruling that the National Nursing Association of Kenya represent the nurses in a return to work formula. Mr. Chris Rakwong went and said he cannot negotiate with an association. And that was after 2 meetings. We went back to court and the court said, okay, and the people agreed. It's not the court that said. Everybody agreed. The government agreed, the employers agreed, the nurses agreed that now let us have nurses representatives. Because the Constitution of Kenya says under Article 1, Sub-Article 2 that the people of Kenya have the right to exercise their sovereign power through their democratically elected representatives. And you know, National Nursing Association of Kenya officials are democratically elected. So Mr. Rakwong says we are going to negotiate now with the nurses representatives. We say fine, let us go. When they went to negotiate now on Friday, on first, he comes and says he does not want Jeremiah Maina to be part of that team. Maina is a nurse. And he sends Maina away because he wants to handpick people to negotiate with. And why is he opposed to the nurses having a return to work formula? We know and we believe that Mr. Chris Rakwong is a beneficiary of the money that's being stolen from nurses. We know and we believe, okay, it's not a belief, he has a fake degree.
Do you have proof of all of these allegations?
Of course,
because today, Seth, you've made quite a number of allegations against the Secretary General of KOTU and against the Chief Nurse as well. Do you have evidence that you can table?
And I'm telling you that I'm ready to be taken anywhere, even if he's in court. I will keep saying what I'm saying. Because Atwoli, for example, has to explain why he has to register KMBDU and refuse to register Union for Nurses, simply because he has a son who is a medical doctor.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, we will...
Mr. Chris Rakwong has a fake degree.
All right, Seth, because these are allegations that I'm not sure we can verify on Sunrise Live this morning, so I will not let you carry on with that line of discussion. That is for another time. But it seems like there are so many obstacles. You've talked about the Chief Nurse, you've talked about KOTU, you've talked about the Minister for Labour. So what next? What happens now if you cannot reach all these people? You yourself said the Prime Minister issued that directive, but it seems to have been a directive that was, you know, a roadside directive rather than actually sitting down and saying, look, let's try and get to the heart of the matter. It seems like all options for the nurses are not going to work out. A very dire situation and something that worries us as Kenyans.
I don't want nurses to despair, and I don't want the public to despair. In this country, we have 3 arms of government. We have the judiciary, we have the executive, and we have parliament. What the nurses are being told is that parliament has failed. They failed them completely. The politicians are just busy. Even like politicians from Western Province, honestly, they have no mandate to campaign in that province because it's 100% shutdown in Western Province. And you have people who say they want to represent these people, the dying people, who will vote for you when people are dying. So we have 3 arms of government. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have parliament. What we are saying is that the executive arm of the government is having problems because of corruption. The Prime Minister gave a roadside executive directive, and which was followed by a written one the following day. It was written to the Minister, the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Labour, directing that the Nurses Union should be registered. The following day, the Permanent Secretary, the Minister of Labour, wrote back saying that they cannot register the Nurses Union. The decision of the board is final. So we are saying out of the 3 arms of government, we still have one arm of the government that has not said that it's not going to handle nurses' issues. We have the judiciary. and our issue is before the judiciary. And I'm saying that I believe our judiciary is growing to become independent, apart from a few people who do not want to do it.
And you have not been happy with the judicial ruling that has come out recently. What are you hoping for today, without being prejudicial and without, speaking too much about it? But you are going to court actually in just a few minutes from now, so we should start winding up this so you can make your way to the court very quickly. Tell us about that and what it is you hope to hear from the courts today.
I want to say that today was to give a report on the return to work formula by the conciliator as well as the nurses who are taking part in that. But the report that the court is going to be given is that the ministry has never been serious. The ministry has decided who to represent nurses. As a result of that, it went there and it cornered our representative that it had favored itself. So there's nothing that came out. We will be expecting the court to give more directive. But we are saying that decision by Lady Justice Maureen should not paint a grim picture on the entire judiciary. We are saying Lady Justice Maureen has her personal problems. You remember she came from FKE. She was immediately the boss in FKE, so...
Okay, let me redirect you, Seth, because I know you're going to say how unhappy you are with that judgment. But today you're hoping to hear a report on a return to work formula, which hopefully should be able to convince the chief nurse to, speak to your ministry to perhaps put the return to work formula in place?
The chief nurse, Mr. Chris Rakom, even if he's given 100 days, there will be no return to work formula.
So then the court process today
the court has the industrial court is not an ordinary court. It's a court that has vast powers. It has enormous powers. It has the mandate to do some things that any ordinary court cannot do. The industrial court can even turn itself into an arbitrator and ask people, let us sit down and let us discuss these things. It's not an ordinary court.
Now that you talk about that, and the industrial court probably putting all the stakeholders together to resolve this issue, do you think the Prime Minister could have done more besides just saying, nurses need a union, let it get registered, let's get back to work? Are you disappointed with that? The President, we haven't seen him publicly talk about this issue. What is it that you would be making an appeal to the Prime Minister today, to the President, to the Ministry of Medical Services, to the Ministry of Labour, in terms of getting everybody to sit down on the table? Do you think there's political will to sort out this issue as fast as possible?
The truth is there's no political will. As I explained to you, is that Tom Ondeke is vying a ticket parliamentary seat on an ODM ticket. And he is the Secretary General of the Union of Kenya Civil Servants.
This goes to the heart of the Prime Minister. Do you think then he's being compromised in this and might not be able to help out?
My message to the Prime Minister is that he should stand up as a nationalist. He should stop being coerced by cheap party politics. He should stand up and say, look here, the New Nyanza Provincial General Hospital is closed down. Where are my people going? Let him even, if I were the Prime Minister, I'll even say, I'm not ready to be a president if these hospitals are not working the following day. The President, when we had a fake police officer, the President woke up the other day and said, there be a commission to investigate this fake police officer. It means then that the only essential services in Kenya is the police service and the defense forces, because the nurses have been on strike for 3 months and the President has not said anything. I'm calling upon the President to look at the crying Kenyans, the poor Kenyans who cannot afford healthcare services in public institutions. In fact, the President can give a presidential directive that I order that nurses go back to work even within 24 hours, without even being written, without any form of victimization. And I'm assuring you nurses will go back to work. But when the President remains aloof and is like he's not aware, maybe the people who are supposed to update the President are not doing it, we find that one as really against the people of Kenya.
Seth, do you think this issue of the nurses being on strike has been swept under the rug? It's not headline news. We are in the campaign season. Many of the headlines that we see on a day-to-day basis is so-and-so was here, so-and-so is here. These are the latest opinion polls. This is what will happen should we go to an election on March the 4th. Do you feel like this election has stamped out the issue of nurses, and which you've talked about? It's not just about getting the union registered, but it's about improving the working conditions, which then of course affects the patients as well. Do you think that everybody is focused on the election and not on the healthcare system?
The priorities of this country, unfortunately, are very different. Even the media, the priorities are very different, but I'm happy that we have us here today. It means you have shifted your priorities. It is true, headlines everywhere for like 2-3 weeks, there has been nothing about the nurses' strike. But the media can do much better, because even the change we have in this country was almost 90% driven by the media. And when we have the poor people suffering,